We're here with Jeff Schaaf, a Daytonian abroad in Orlando, Florida. You've moved away from Dayton, and how long has it been since you've been out of Dayton?
It'll be a year on the beginning of August.
And why did you leave Dayton?
Things were going for shit for me there. I had been unemployed for over a year. I had been homeless for the previous month. I was living in fucking Woodland Cemetery. I'm serious.
Not to laugh, I mean.
No, well, it is funny. So I'm just sitting around there with nothing to do with myself, and I'm, thinking like I got to get something positive going. I gotta get back on track, with my life and with my career. And I had always wanted to come to Le Cordon Bleu, and I had never been able to get the financial aid because I had defaulted on a student loan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was able to get that all cleared up, and I got my financial aid, and so here I am in Orlando going to the Le Cordon Bleu, and I'm loving it. I'm having a great time, meeting lots of really nice, cool people, and doing a lot of really, fun and exciting shit. It's awesome. I wish I would have done it years ago. I say that every time I talk about this. I wish I would have done it years ago.
But, you can't go back on any moment in life, and so that's why it's so important. How is it being out of Dayton for a year change your perspective on Dayton?
Well, I love Dayton. I'm one of those few people who doesn't hate their hometown. I don't, because you always hear people bashing their hometown.
Yeah, they do it everywhere, though.
Yeah, they do it everywhere, I know, but I actually truly do love Dayton. And Dayton, it will always be my hometown. You can't change where you're from. And so, I'm not ashamed or, I wasn't like, trying to burn up the highway just to get out of there, because I've always felt like, it's not so much where you're at, it's what you do. But what I was doing in Dayton was engaging in a lot of self-destruction. And I always tell people, I had to get my ass out of Dayton so I could get my head out of my ass.
Well, that's interesting now, because there seems to be among certainly a certain segment of society in Dayton a penchant towards self-destruction.
Yeah, and I was with
property destruction and all the stuff that goes in it, and it brings everyone down.
Yeah.
And talk about that a little more. I mean, what is it about this town, or is it this country, or that makes people, that gets people in that, fuck it type of mode?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it has to do anything with the town, with Dayton per se. Sometimes it has to do with being in your hometown for so long. I lived in Dayton all of my life, except for a few years in Cincinnati during the early 90s. But, Cincinnati is pretty much the same as Dayton, only bigger.
Yeah.
And, you start out, when you're in high school being a partier, and if you never leave your hometown or do anything more positive, then you just get on that track and never get off of it. And, eventually, most people eventually get married and settle down and have a family, and that's how they get out of that rut. Well, that never happened for me. I've never been the marrying type. I've never been much good at being a boyfriend or whatever. I guess I'm too selfish or whatever. But,
your honesty is awesome.
Yeah, but most people will tell you I'm a fucking jackass. And I told Brian, I told one of the bartenders at the Bell one time, I was like, there's a reason that I'm still single. But it's not a sustainable lifestyle, man. And alcohol is not really much different than any other kind of drug or narcotic.
Man, I look at it more like, to be honest, we had a conversation yesterday. I'm like, which do you want to be around? Heroin user, and not that I'm like trying to like perpetuate or support heroin use, but heroin user is, oh man, I'm sleepy, dude. I'm gonna go to bed.
Yeah.
I'll see you in a few hours. He goes to sleep.
Right.
Yeah, and then the alcohol, brings out all kinds of, crazy stuff, crazy acting, crazy talking, aggression,
Yeah.
unknown feelings.
Yeah.
They haven't been let out that maybe should have.
Yeah, I never really considered myself to be a mean drunk, and I wasn't one of those guys
I'd agree
with
with
a
you.
chip
I've
on his
drank
shoulder,
with you
always going out
before.
for a fight. But I would get pretty rowdy, you know what I mean, and shoot my mouth off and shit like that. It sometimes led to trouble. More often than not, it ended up with me, waking up in the fucking county jail, wondering what I did to get there. And but I was talking to this girl at school this morning, and she's crying and moaning because her mom has a fucking drug addiction. Her mom is a crackhead.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and this is what I always tell people that are into drugs or too heavily into alcohol or whatever, that, nothing, no good ever comes from it. Nothing good. I've never, ever met anybody who said, said that they were glad to be a fucking dope fiend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Nobody's ever said, man, that was the best decision I ever made, smoking crack. It only leads to, any kind of drug or alcohol abuse. And I'm not trying to come off like I'm all sober and in AA. I still drink, but not like I used to when I lived in Dayton.
Sure.
But it only leads to three things, man. You either end up dead or in prison or straight. You get off of it. There's nobody, well, I don't know, maybe William Burroughs is the exception that proves the rule, but nobody lives like that forever. Nobody stays a junkie or, whatever for their entire life.
Yeah,
Might be some alcoholics that make it to a ripe old age, but even still, sooner or later it's going to kill you.
Sure. Putting toxic chemicals in your body on a regular daily basis. I mean,
yeah.
You don't have to be a genius to figure out. I watch what happens when I do that to my plants. My body's full of living cells, and
Right. Well, like I said, I've known a lot of people who got involved with drugs and narcotics, and I've never ever seen a single one of them end up better off for it.
What do you think? Do you think the war on drugs has helped, hurt, or destroyed Dayton?
The war on drugs, and I don't know if you saw this, but on the news, but a whole bunch of former world leaders have come out and said that the global war on drugs is a failure, and we need to shift emphasis from prosecution and punishment to education and treatment, which is something I believed for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
The war on drugs is really a war against the poor. It's an excuse for the cops to harass anybody that they want to. I was riding home from work one night on my bicycle down Clover Street in East Dayton, and I got stopped by the cops. Mm-hmm. For no reason. They just stopped me.
Yeah, I've been stopped, especially like on Park Avenue or in South Park. You want to get stopped on a bicycle? What are you doing?
It's like just being in that neighborhood is a suspicious activity, and they stopped me. They asked me for my IDs. I asked them why they were stopping me, and they said, well, the dope dealers in this area use their bicycles to get around and get away from us, and you're on a bike.
Well, I guess
that makes me suspicious.
They walk too.
Yeah, and it was just they just wanted to pat me down and see if they could find anything on me. And I've never really been into drugs too much. I'm not going to say that I never messed around a little bit, but I've never been seriously addicted to drugs. But I had nothing, and they let me go. But they stopped me. And they had me in handcuffs in the back of the car while they checked my, record and all of that other bullshit. And finally let me go. But that
sounds like false imprisonment to me.
Yeah, it's total bullshit, and it's an excuse, and it's from the war on drugs. That's their excuse. They can just point at anyone and accuse them of being suspicious or behaving suspiciously and check their pockets. And, it's like living in a police state.
Do you think a lot of that has fueled? Like, you lived on Clover Street, you lived in different parts of the east side, been around Dayton. Do you think a lot of that has fueled that sense of disrespect for any type of authority whatsoever in the inner city?
Yeah, definitely it has. It definitely causes, people to resent and be suspicious of the police, that, it's like an us versus them kind of mentality. And, that's why I say it's war against the poor, But, hopefully people will start to become more enlightened, it's because of the fact that it is illegal contraband that pushes it to the black market, and that's where that's where the price of different drugs becomes so hyperinflated, and then you get all of this money coming into it, and then that leads to the violence that you see. I mean, there's thousands of people killed every year over drugs and money because of the war on drugs. And this is what some of these world leaders were saying on the news a couple days ago, that if you start decriminalizing, especially the less dangerous drugs like marijuana, and you decriminalize these things and switch the emphasis to education and treatment, then they come off of the black market, the price of them goes way down, and they're no longer a valuable commodity that people are willing to kill and die over.
Yeah, I agree. Do you see any push towards that kind of thinking in Dayton at all, or is it that pretty much someone else going to have to lead the cause?
Everybody who smokes pot, they always go to the normal rallies whenever one comes to town. And a lot of people do believe that, and I think it is kind of a generational thing. Each generation becomes a little more open-minded towards that and towards a lot of things. I mean, look, 100 years ago, a black guy and a white guy couldn't really be friends in public. Or much less. It was against the law to marry interracially.
Yeah.
In a lot of places. But as generations go, the next generation becomes a little more tolerant of whatever kind of activity or behavior, and then the generation after that becomes even a little more tolerant. So I think that by the time my grandkids are born, the war on drugs will probably be over, because people our age and our kids even more so are seeing it as a failed policy. You know what I mean?
Sure. It's like, we can look around the city of Dayton and just see like the devastation, like I talked from about the disrespect for any kind of authority, which you see in things like tagging, things like people walking in the middle of the street when they don't have to. A lot of things like that, and it also creates that snowball effect of, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm getting the hell out of here. And it's all because of something we created, not really anything that was organic that needed to be stopped. People have been using drugs for thousands of years.
Yeah, sure.
We promote probably one of the, like I said earlier, one of the most detrimental drugs. Giving a choice between an obnoxious drunk and a sleepy heroin junkie, I'll pick the heroin junkie.
Right.
And we're always seeing in Dayton now, it used to be drug war. We're seeing people get shot in the back of bars now all the time. It's like every weekend someone is shot in a parking lot behind a bar.
It's ridiculous, man. It's crazy, and it's like you said, it's over drugs usually, or drugs or something on the periphery of drugs. Yeah, man. But those attitudes change. They evolve. You know what I mean? And you're seeing a more tolerant attitude evolve to that. But something else that they were talking about was the tremendous amount of money and resources and time, and with the police and with the courts, that goes into enforcing all these draconian laws that aren't having any effect. People aren't using drugs less because it's illegal. If anything, they're using them more because the whole "fuck the cops, fuck the law" kind of attitude.
Sure.
But they're talking about all the tremendous amount of money and blood that's going into this failed policy, and each generation, like I said, the attitude evolves, and pretty soon you're going to see them start to shift all these resources from enforcement and punishment into education and treatment, and then the things that grow from that might be an increased trust for the law and a greater respect for the law. By the time our grandkids are our age, if things go down this path, we might be that much closer to a utopian society. I think people will be less likely to use drugs if they're not illegal, so there's no taboo associated with it, and they're educated about them from an early